Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumos Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Hey. We are learning now the second to last daf in the Masechta. We are learning daf Kuvav, and we're going to start on daf Kuvav Amud Aleph all the way on top of the Amud. Now we actually are in middle of a brisa, the brisa that we began on Kuf Hey Amud Beis. The brisa's first case was scenarios, beginning to enumerate scenarios in which a non-Kohen may derive benefit, hano'as kilui, benefit from the light or the warmth of Truma Tameya being consumed, and that case was partners. So the word is that if a Yisrael is partnered with a Kohen, even if the Kohen is not present, all of the stores work. That's the case. They have a store, and he has to go get boxes from a second story to bring it to the first story, but there's no light in the second story. Being that the boxes, if they are of merchandise, which when sold will be beneficial also for the partner, for the Kohen, so that will allow the Yisrael to use a lamp, a nair of Shemen Sreifa, even though the Kohen is not present. That was the first case of the Brisa. So we're going to continue to learn new scenarios, Gavaldic scenarios, as just speaking out as an example, that a non-Kohen is allowed to use a torch that is being fueled by Shemen Sreifa Truma Tameya to walk down a path and not walk in the darkness. And we will see why will that be allowed, even though there's no Kohen present. We're going to have also a fantastic application of bittul. Bittul meaning, what were to happen if there is a lamp filled with oil of Truma Tameya, but that lamp is placed amongst other lamps of Chulin. So the light that we are getting from the oil of Truma is, let's say, insignificant. To what level the Gemara doesn't go into, but we will apply the concept of bittul by saying that you can leave it there because it's nullified amongst the other lights. We're going to have a big concept, which we did not have until now, and that is that we're not allowed to be machalel or be mavaze truma tameya, even though it's tameya, by performing activities by the light of this truma oil type of work that's called the malacha bezuya. In other words, we have to show reverence even to the oil that's tameh. And finally, I would like to share that like this, that I know when we began to learn the sugya, Yakir was here, he made a mention about can you use Shemen Sreifa for Shabbos candles. Actually, he looked up Ein Bameh Madlikin for the Sfardim and for those who say it every Erev Shabbos, there is the statement that Shemen Sreifa is not allowed to be used. Let me tell you exactly what it is. When Yom Tov falls on Erev Shabbos, the Chachamim prohibited for a kohenes to use Shemen Sreifa, Truma, oil that's Tameh. Why? Because since Psulei HaMikdashim, consecrated the temple food that became puzzle, that became invalidated, that has to be burnt, that is not allowed to be burnt on Yom Tov. So the Chachamim were afraid that if a kohenes is going to use Shemen Tameya for his Shabbos candles, people will confuse that oil with Psulei HaMikdashim, and they're going to think that just like the woman is lighting it, so maybe that also would mean that you are allowed to burn Psulei HaMikdashim on Yom Tov when you're not allowed to. So when Yom Tov is on Erev Shabbos, a kohenes is not allowed to use that type of oil for her Shabbos candles, and that will be our words of introduction. We're going to actually not go the whole way through. We're going to learn until Daf Kuvav Amid Beis to a point, and then we're going to leave the final part for the final daf. So let's jump inside Daf Kuvav, all the way on top of the Amid. Again, we are in middle of the Brisa. First case was about the partners, and now the Brisa will give another scenario, all where non-Kohanim will be allowed to have benefit from the light or from the warmth of Truma Tameya oil that's being burnt. Says the Brisa, Kohen Sheba Eitzel Yisrael. If a Kohen comes to a home of a Yisrael, he has some sort of account to settle with him. So they have to go ahead and they have to make cheshbonis. Vehidlik al gab of Shemen Sreifa, and therefore the Kohen lit as he's allowed to. And that's already what we learned in the Mishnah. Even though there's a Yisrael present, there's nothing wrong for the Yisrael to also get benefit when the Kohen is getting benefit. So that is something that's allowed. Now, what the Braisa is really not elaborating verbally, but the chiddush over here, Iro, is that once the lamp was lit beheter, once the kohen does his accountings with the Yisrael, the kohen can leave the lamp there. That's the word. You don't have to extinguish it, even though when the kohen will leave, the Yisrael is going to be there by himself with that lamp. So asks the Gemara. Now, this is really what we learned in Daf Kuf Hey. There are two scenarios in which, in the home of a Yisrael, you're going to have Shem and Sreifa. One will be that the Yisrael is a descendant of a Kohen, right? His mother's father was a Kohen. His Guzeda, the Kohen who passed away, owned Truma. His heir is this Yisrael. That can be one scenario where a Yisrael will have Shem and Sreifa. The other scenario, which will be a much more common scenario, is that we Yisraelim, we have to give to the Kohanim our Truma. Now, the question that we had in the last year was, if I, a Yisrael, if I have Truma Tohira, Truma Tameya, normally I have to give it to the Kohen. In the cases where we are learning in the Mishnah, now in the Braisa, that I, the Yisrael, am allowed to benefit from that oil, do I have to first give it to a Kohen? Or am I able to use it even without giving it to the Kohen? And what we establish is, of course, I cannot use it without giving it to the Kohen, because aside of the issue of whether I could or cannot benefit from it, this is not mine. I have stuff that I have to give to the Kohen. But what I could do is that I don't actually have to give it to him. I can legally give it to him. How would I do that? I would take another person. I would tell the other person, lift it up on behalf of the Kohen. I can do an act of zikoi al yedei acher. Anything that's only to the betterment of the recipient, even if the recipient is not aware that someone is acquiring something for his behalf, that acquisition happens. And then I can use the lamp. The kohen is coming to my house. He needs to make cheshbonos. I need lighting. I don't have lighting. So the kohen is going to get to use it. But I have to first give it to the kohen. And that's what the Gemara is going to say. When you're learning again this Braisa, it sounds like you can just light it without Bachlal gifting it. Don't you at least have to legally give it to the Kohen? So the Gemara says, yeah, Nechanami. The same thing we said in the last class. Elo, that's the Girsa. No question that first the Kohen must be gifted with the Truma Tameya. But you're figuring out how to do it without actually giving it to him. The way you are giving it to him is by lighting the lamp when he walks into the house. Now, Tony, we learned in the Braisa, Bas Yisrael shenichnas alas Yisrachav shel kohen. If you have a non-kohen woman and she's going into she's doing something for the kohen. This is this concept of the store we had before. In other words, if she's doing work for the kohen, she can use the lamp. Avaloi shel Yisrael. Now, this statement seems to be pshita. Of course, she can't use the lamp if she's doing work for a Yisrael. Actually, some take this out. But even if it's in here, this was said for the next statement, to build up. Tani, we learned in the Braisa that Bas Yisrael shenichnas ala hadlik mikoyhenes. So you have a Bas Yisrael. She wants to light. She needs to light her torch. So today you have a match. Today you have a lighter. What you always could do is you can light it from someone else's fire. The case here is that there is a kohenes that already has her lamp. Her lamp has truma tameya oil. However, what's common is that if I take my wick and I light it from your lamp, what I would do by habit then is I would wet my wick with your oil. It should become more flammable. So she's allowed to do that. She's allowed, Bas Yisrael, shenichnas ala hadlik mikoyhenes, toivelas psila b'shem and sreifu medalaka. She's allowed to submerge her wick in the koheneses and her friends, the koheneses oil, and light it. Problem is, why? Here, why is she allowed to do it? She's doing something solely for her benefit. So that's going to be the big chiddush over here. And this is very important. We're speaking about a woman who needs a lamp as a flashlight. She's walking outside in the dark, and she needs to light up the way. And therefore, since she's walking in the dark to light up the way, she's allowed to actually take the oil to some level from her friend, the kohenes. But even that has to be explained. Why would she be allowed to do that? And here we're going to have a big chiddush, guys. So says the Gemara, that Rav Huna b'shem devei Rabbi Yanai, that really initially, as we have been learning, the prohibition for a Yisrael to benefit from Truma Tamea oil while it's being burnt is a rabbinic prohibition. There was one incident, there was one time that in Israel, there were wild wolves that were roaming the neighborhoods, a certain neighborhood, and walking in the dark was mortally dangerous. People's life were in danger. Somehow lighting it up was beneficial in the protection of these wolves. During that time, the Chachamim waived the prohibition of Yisraelim of using Truma Tameya because they wanted us to have fuel. When you're going out, if I'm walking in a dangerous place, which would be at night, I'm allowed to use it. Now, what's amazing is that even after this phenomena of packs of wild wolves roaming around, even when that ended, once the Chachamim already gave a heter, they never rescinded their permit. So now it remains permitted, even though you don't have such wild animals roaming the streets. We live in LA. First of all, here you have people that are worse than wolves. Then the people there were normal people. Then we have the homeless today. We also have coyotes here. There's plenty of stuff over here.
Right here next to Sola.
Yeah. And there was a time when wolves were roaming around. And during that time, it makes sense. The whole prohibition is a rabbinic prohibition. When there was such a danger, they said, we removed the prohibition. That means that there was a period of time when a non-kohen is allowed to lechatchila take shemen sreifa and use it. But this mishlach haze'evim was not a phenomenon that went on forever. Nevertheless, they never nullified their permit. So since they never nullified the permit remains. Now you can think this is something very strange. So the Gemara says, I want you to know that we have a similar idea. We have a similar pathway in another area that we have learned in Masechta Shvius. And that's what the Gemara is saying right now. That Kamod, the Tamar Taman. Just like we learned this together in Masechta Shvius. And here we're speaking about that the Chachamim, if you remember, let's go through the Seder. If someone plows their field on Shvius, my friends, they are violating a biblical law. Came along the Chachamim and they said, well, if someone is going to plow their field on Shvius, we're going to penalize them midrabanan. What will we penalize them? That person is not allowed to use that plowed field post Shvius year. You plowed it on Shvius. Now, people didn't even plant. They just plowed it. They wanted to get a heads up. So the Chachamim said, you plowed your field, can't use it in year number 8. Then there was a time that the government, the Romans, who get money from taxes, they don't want the Jews to keep Shvius. So they told us that you have to plow your fields on Shvius. At least after Shvius, you can start planting. So during that Roman decree, the Chachamim did not want us, listen, the Romans, if you violated their decrees, I don't know, they would crucify you, they would take your hands off. They were very cruel. Their legal system, like in America, America is the country and we're proportional to the population. Most people are sitting in jail. It's like in a crazy number. So the Romans were in law and order. So the Chachamim said, okay, we take away our gzeira, that if you plow the field, you can't use it the next year. No, you can plow it and you can use it the next year, never to use it on Shvius. You can't go against God's law, but they rescinded their law. Then the Romans took away their decree. But the Chachamim never took back their heter. In other words, we find these ideas that the Chachamim give a rabbinic law. Something happened in which they say, you know what? We're taking away the rabbinic law. Even though whatever caused them to take it away went away, they left it mutter. So just like we find, Lo Amad Bezdin Ubitel, Afhache, Lo Amad Bezdin Ubitel. So these are two cases that the Gemara compares. Coming back to our scenario, that forever, when you are walking in the street, if there is no city lights, like on Holt Avenue, there's no pitch dark, you are allowed to take Shem and Sreifa. Now, if I'm a Yisrael and I didn't give it to the Kohen yet, I have to do a Zikoy Al Yedei Acher. I have to give it, but then I can keep it. And I can use the Kohen's oil to light up, to make it light for me. So I should not be in danger. Because the Kohen does not want for a Yisrael to be in danger. There are many things that we can assume that Edo is happy if we use his money because it's to the benefit of another Jew. And we don't even have to ask him. We can just do it. L'chaim to that. Here you go. We're putting a lot of stuff on the Kahanim right now. Okay, says the Gemara. B'kodesh shel Kohen, if you have the animals, right, the bakar, the cattle of a Kohen, shehoya machal eitzel Yisrael, that the animal is eating alongside a Yisrael, or v'chein bigdei shel kohen shoyineragetz el Yisrael, if you have a garment of a kohen that's being woven, and the weaver is also weaving Yisraelim garments. In other words, you're doing work. Someone is doing work. The work is for the benefit of a kohen, but he's also doing work for the benefit of a Yisrael. Here also, madlik al gab of shem and sreifa. The worker may light shem and sreifa, or the owner of the Yisrael, the owner of the animal, the Yisrael, the owner of the Yisrael's beged. He can provide shem and sreifa to the weaver, to the animal feeder, because of the heter that we are learning. I mean, this is basically the law of the Mishnah, that as long as the lamp is lit for the benefit of a kohen, there's nothing wrong if a Yisrael benefits as well. Either it already belonged to the Yisrael, or through zikoi al yedei acher. And the final heter in the Braisa, we're learning all scenarios where people are getting around and they are actually using the truma tameya that normally should only have been benefited by the kohen. Next final case, kohen shuba lasis cheshbon Yisrael. Kohen is coming to settle accounts with the Yisrael. The hidlik al gab of shem and sreifa. So he walks into the Jew's house and he says, "We got to make cheshbones." So the Jew says, "All right, for this I have to open up the light, but these lights I'm going to use your oil." This is basically the version that we had in the beginning of today's brayso. Some people put it over here. Here the brayso is just being more elaborate. That when the kohen is present, me, the Yisrael, and the kohen, I can use Shem and Sreifa to be able to make my math calculations on paper. That for sure is okay. That's what we learned in the Mishnah. The chiddush here is that even when the kohen leaves, even though v'amad v'halachloi, you would think now that the kohen walked out of the house, I have to put it out. No, it's not true. That's the biggest chiddush. In other words, the act of consumption is the act of the lighting. The actual consumption goes on. It's like Erev Shabbos. We are allowed to light Shabbos candles. We're not allowed to create fire on Shabbos, and I'm benefiting from the candles on Shabbos. There's no issue with Chilul Shabbos, because the act which is prohibited, I did Erev Shabbos. The prohibition is not the actual benefit. The act of the consumption was put into motion by a kohen beheter. So once the act was put in beheter, you don't have to say, no, you walked out, now you got a problem. That's great. Like when we learned in the Mishnah that Ali de Cholim, when B'rishus Kohen, that was where there was no Kohen present, the way we learned the Gemara. I'm allowed to light it when there's no Kohen present on the presumption that the Kohen is going to come back. Here we're saying that once you lit it while the Kohen was present, you can leave the fire burning.
Or the presumption that a Kohen will come, period, at some point. Didn't we say that too?
We only said it by Bikr Chaylim. That was the Gemara, the way we learned the version, because since Bikr Chaylim ain't lo shir, right. Bikr Chaylim is a mitzvah more than any other mitzvah that we can presume a kohen is coming. Even if we knew the kohen was there, he's going to come back.
Right.
You don't say it by all other mitzvahs. Okay. Now the Gemara, it tells you a story. These are the big agadatas we have over here in the Yerushalmi. Rabbi Hananya bar Achberi, that's his name. Guys, Rabbi Chia from Tzipoidi was a kohen. So this guy, Rab Chananya, worked for him. He went to his house. He did work for him. And mi azale, whenever he would leave, whenever Rab Chananya would leave his day's work by the kohen to go back home, mali le boitzina shem and sreifa, right? Butzina, we have these words in the Zohar for a lamp. So he would take from his host, the kohen, shem and sreifa, and he would use it to walk home. In other words, this is a Veistach. There's nothing greater than a story. This is to tell you that even when there was no fear of wild animals roaming the streets of Tzipoidi, at some point and on, it was mutter, lechatchila, for a Yisrael to take Shem and Sreifa and to use it as a lamp, to use it as a flashlight while they are walking in the dark. Says the Gemara, "Veloy kein taninon." But did we not learn in a brayso only lasei srachav shel kohen avoloy li Yisrael? Did we not learn that? Yeah, a Yisrael can use it without the kohen present. That was the case of the partners in a store, because he's doing it for the kohen. Here the guy is walking home. There's absolutely no benefit for the kohen. So says the Gemara, Amrin, di la havet avet kain, lo hava asi. So first of all, I want to make it clear. This Gemara does not hold. You have to know how to learn Yerushalmi. This Gemara disputes what we learned above, that since there was a mishlacha ze'evim, therefore there's a carte blanche. No, the Gemara says there has to be a heter. The heter over here. No, this Gemara disagrees with that. Stam to walk home using the lamp of a Shem and Sreifa is usher. But since Rab Chananya worked by a kohen, if he would not be allowed to use that oil to come and to go, he would not work for the kohen. You see how far you stretch it? So you can consider him walking home using the oil of the kohen, Shem and Sreifa. That's why he took the job. If not, he would not take the job. And the host, the Rabbi Tzipora, needed the guy to come to him to work.
I see the nafkamina being that according to this, we're learning it has to be something in the kohen's interest. For
clear.
Wolves, you're saying that's in that person's interest.
That's right.
So,
Clear, 100%. So there's a
The Kohen
machlokes.
needs for him to come back. The Kohen needs him to come back.
That's what we're saying. The Kohen needs him to
Right.
come back. That's what we're saying, Kevin. But the point is that when we learned the Gemara above, that when it came to walking in the dark, you can use Shem and Sreifa, you didn't need for the Kohen to have any benefit. So this implies, that's the way the Gemara is saying, it's that we don't, there's not everyone agrees with that broader heter. Let's go weiter. Savrin on Meimar, Kadim se Beise, have a metapele. So the Chachamim thought that that when he comes home, he'll have to put the lamp out. Why is that? Because it's a new location. You came home, so okay, you have a heter when you're walking in the dark. But they thought, okay, but when he comes home, he has to be very careful. So the Gemara says, Amar Rab Chinana, Al Yidei Kain have a koratz bashachar. No, he did not have to put it out. Why did he not have to put it out? Guys, the word koratz is an interesting Aramaic, Yerushalmi Aramaic word that's used for someone who wakes up while it's still dark. By him leaving that lamp on, he took a lot of oil. You see, that's what happens when you have government money. He took the oil from the kohen. He took a lot of oil. So not only did he use it to walk at night, he let it lit in the home the whole night. What was his heter? Like this, he can get up early. If he wouldn't have anything lit in his house, it would be harder to get out of it, pitch dark.
Wait, didn't we say a minute ago that if it started with a heter, the heter continues
Started with the
anyway?
heter. No, 100% came. It started, well, no, it didn't start with the heter. No, the starting with heter was the previous case where the kohen came to the house to do cheshbonos. Here, he took it when he went out.
Isn't that a heter?
That's a heter because if he wouldn't be able to have that, he wouldn't work there. But now when he's coming home, he's saying, I'm leaving it on the whole time. I'm letting it burn the whole time because now that I have a lamp lit in my home, the worker is saying, now I can get up early in the morning.
I have a theory, Rabbi.
Yes.
My theory is that in general, we want to get rid of Shem and Sreifa. I think
I so agree with the Gabbai because whenever you have Truma laying around, there's always the fear that the Kohen will forget that this is Tameh and he'll consume it. That's for sure. So I think you put this into context, it helps understand all these atatim. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Ada Shamashon. Again, we're speaking about a worker. Here's Shamash. Shol Rav Imi, begin the Anotzov Apsila Min Choylon. When I am being Mishamish, a nurse, someone who's ill, now obviously this has to begin that there was a kohen was present. So here, Kevan is, every case is a case. The guy's a nurse. There's a kohen present. He's lighting, like we learned in the Mishnah, he's lighting a lamp, he's lighting the candle in the presence of a kohen. Doesn't matter if the chayla is a Yisrael, because there's a kohen present. The question is whether he now can take that wick for his personal use. That is how we understand his question. That's what he asked Ravimi. So Amalei, let me tell you how we can do it. In other words, he's not giving you a carte blanche heter. Since you lit it beheter, the way we learned before, you can leave it on. But what you could do is that as long as you have other lamps that have chulin oil, you don't have to be concerned that there's no kohen present, because the light of the Shem and Sreifa becomes nullified batel amongst other lights. Amalei batel hu al gabe psilois. This is a very big statement. Givaldik.
on Shabbos a little bit, no? If you're in the dark and a guy turns on the light for you, then you can't benefit from it. But if you had other light and it just like helped a little bit.
That's right.
then it's
That's
not
right.
bad.
By Shabbos, we say the same thing, that if a guy turned on the light, even if he did not do it for himself, if he did it for me, as long as that I could have done whatever I would needed to do without that light, the fact that there is more light doesn't stop me from using the more light. Another little vart that many of the commentators say that the reason why you needed this heter was only because the Ada Shamasha wanted to take the lamp to another location. If the lamp would have stayed in the same location, then we're not going to make every piece of the Gemara argue. We learned before that once the act of consumption was done by heter, you can leave it. Here, you can leave it where it is. This Shamish wanted now to take it around to other environments, but Mustama, he had a candelabra. So one of the things were filled with Shem and Sreifa. So he was told, if there are other ones, then you're good to go. That's the way we'll learn it. And also, this type of concept of making a bittul was also actually paskined by Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi to the shamashim of the household of the Vei. The Vei means the household of Nehemiah, that once you're being mavatal it, you don't have a problem. Says the Gemara, Rav Imi Nosaf Psila. Rav Imi himself would take a wick. Speaking about a wick that was lachatchila soaked in Shem and Sreifa on behalf of a kohen. Now it's already lit. And now you want to know whether you can use it. So it's not only that Rav Imi gave a heter to Ada Shamasha, but he went beyond the letter of the law. He himself, Taka, practiced that. As long as there were other candles, other lamps present, he said that it's batal. However, but Rav Ila loy nasaf psila. So he did not rely on this heter, this concept of bittul. I'm just curious, like how much bittul, how many other candles the Gemara doesn't say. So says the Gemara, leis leil Rav Ila hadod Rav Imi. When he did not do it, doesn't mean that they argue. So the Gemara says he argues, but not because of what you are thinking about, because we don't convolute two different things. One issue is, am I Yisrael allowed to benefit from Shem and Sreifa? He actually accepted the heter of Rav Imi that if it was lit because the kohen was present, and now you have other lamps that are chulin oil, you can have benefit from it. Mitzad the iser of a Yisrael benefiting hana'ah shel kiloi. But there's another issue, that this oil does not belong to you. This oil belongs to a kohen. That's a issue of mumminess. It's gezel. So Saval Rav Ima, that I argue with Rav Imi because of the issue of gezel. In other words, how can I use oil that does not belong to me? Belongs to the kohen. Gavaldik. Now says the Gemara, even when it comes, even according to Rav Imi, we don't consider it an act of gezel. Let me use my logic, because we can presume that the kohen is happy that a Yisrael is using Hashem and Sreifa. Let's go with that. I got a problem. The Gemara has a problem with Rav Imi. And now we are introducing something that we never learned before. And that is Shamasha Mivaz Biza Bakedusha. A Shamish, we're speaking about a nurse. So some of the work that a nurse does is, they have to, it's hygienic work. Now you would think Shem and Sreifa has absolutely no Kedusha. It does have Kedusha, it's Truma. So we're saying that using lamp, this is, by the way, this is not Yisrael, this is even Kohen related. Using that light to do a certain type of work, that we're going to call it a work of bizui, even though it's a human need, you have to clean up someone's body, you're not allowed to do it in front of that shemen. It's amazing. So in other words, the issue with the heter of Rav Imi, Rav Ila had an issue of gezel. The Gemara has another issue. Look inside the Maraful, the 11 lines from the top. We're speaking about a nurse. Why? How is there a bizui? Amazing. Says the Gemara. Gamliel Zuga. Zuga is a glassmaker. Shol Rabbi Yasa.
In terms of what's considered
No, it's amazing. No, very vague.
Probably can't use this like rest.
Clearly, that's what we're saying. That's the meaning. The shamash here means a nurse. That's the issue. The issue is human waste. Another thing, but we learned as exceptions. So now the question is, if one were to add a little bit of oil, does that allow you to use it? And by the way, we're not talking about adding a tremendous amount. There's a logic of even adding a little bit. Maybe that takes away the issue of a Yisrael using shemen sreifa. Amalei loy tani Rabbi Shaya ela ein mechayven oisoi lechaboisoi, which is amazing. In other words, the fact that one of the greatest attaining we learned right now is that once the candle is already lit, when the kohen is present, and you're leaving the candle in the same room, and the kohen is walking out. So the chiddush was, since the act of consumption was done by heter, you can leave it. You can leave it. Okay, so is a raya that we don't allow you to add the chulin oil, because then the Tanoim would have already told you that heter. We learned all the heterim possible. The fact that no one suggests that you can add some shemen of chulin means that even if you were to add some shemen chulin, it's not gonna help you. Amar Rabbo,
Not helping. You're not allowed to do it.
It won't take away the isser. That itself is not the heter. Amar Rabbo, Shana Yonasan ben Achmoi. This Yonasan ben Achmoi Torah Braisa that no one knew of. That what did it say in the Braisa? Bas koin. Shehoisoi medis erev Shabbos and chasheicham. And as we mentioned in the words of introduction, that there is a rabbinic prohibition for a kohenes to use shemen sreifa for Shabbos candles on Yom Tov. That means if Friday is Yom Tov, why is that? Because someone who's going to see the kohenes using shemen sreifa might think that you are allowed to burn psulei hamugdashim on Yom Tov, which you're not allowed to. For that, let's use this new idea that we just had in the Gemara of adding chulin. What you can't use, the Chachamim disallowed you to use shemen sreifa for kahenis on Erev Shabbos that is Yom Tiv. But for this, harezu meisefes l'toiche shemen shel chulin, and yes, umidalekes. This is gavaldik. So use this concept of adding, and by the way, adding means adding any amount. And don't come and tell me that the Braisa did not mention it. That's not a problem, because the Braisa was not talking about this scenario. We're speaking not about a Yisrael adding. We're speaking just a way to get out of this rabbinic law for a kohenes not to use shemen sreifa on Yom Tov shchaliyas b'erev Shabbos. Now they heard such a thing. It was a big novelty. Now he's quoted. You have to have credibility of the messenger. Who is this Yonasan ben Achmoi? Right? We never learned, maybe this is the first time, guys, we quoted him. Ma tivye, can we rely on him? So Amalei, so Rab Ze'era answered, yes, Adam Gadolhu, that the Yonasan ben Achmoi is a great man. Ubaki b'mishnaseinu haya, which is amazing. Mishnaseinu, by the way, doesn't only mean Mishnais. It means he is the expert. He knows all of the works of the Tanoim. So if he came with the Baraisa, yes, we're going to rely on him. And Parashay Rab Chia de Kfar Tchumim Kumei Rebbe, that actually this Braisa was expounded on, was taught with Nachabiyurim by Rab Chia in front of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And when Rebbe heard this Braisa, Umanise Chakim, Rebbe said, Yonasan ben Achmoi, he's a Chacham. So you have two people testifying to the greatness of Yonasan ben Achmoi, and therefore we can rely on this Braisa. We'll stop over here, and God willing to be continued. With the help of Hashem, we are going to be Messiah, Mesechtes Trumais. So Trumais, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Hey. We are learning now Daf Kuv Zayin. We left off on Daf Kuv of Amid Beis over here by the two dots. I think it's 9 lines, one or something like that, before the end of the Amid. And we are referring back to the last part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah was speaking about Shemen Sreifa that was used to light up lamps, both the Beis Hamishta in a wedding hall and or in a Beis Ha'avel in a mourning house. In both cases, we're going to learn the pshat in the Mishnah is that they lit it in the large room where the Ar Kohanim. And the Mishnah gave us already the klal that even though there are also Yisraelim present, so what? As long as you have kohanim, so kohanim are benefiting from the Shemen Sreifa, doesn't bother us that Yisraelim are benefiting as well. Even if there's one kohen and 1,000,000 Yisraelim, we're good. However, there is a understood chashash. And what is that? Then maybe someone is going to take one of these lamps and they're going to want to go into another room. These are halls that had side rooms. And in that room, there will only be a Yisrael, they or another Yisrael, and then there won't be a kohen present. And by the way, even learning all of the details that we learned on Daf Kuvav, once you change the location, even though it was lit beheter, that's one of the things we learned in the last Daf. If you change its location, you got a problem. So in the Mishnah, we have a 4-way machloikes tanoim, and before we read it inside, let's review it. The first Tana, Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Loi, the Rosh HaMedabrim, he's the first one quoted in the Mishnah. He differentiates between a Beis HaMishta and a Beis HaAvel in the following direction. And the way we learned in the Marafulda, which is going to be quoting from the Gemara that we're going to learn right now, that when people go to a wedding, they come dressed up nice. And when you move a lamp, there's always a concern that you're going to soil your garments. Today, the wax will fall on you or the oil will fall on you. That fear of not soiling your garments is enough for the rabbis not to have a fear that you're going to go schlep it to another room. No one is going to do that. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that madlik in the Beis HaMishnah. We don't make a rabbinic law. But avoloi bebeis ha'avel, since bebeis ha'avel, the Marafulda says people go with soiled clothing, or people wear black clothing today. People don't have to dress up. They dafka don't dress up. One of the simple reasons for which we cover the mirrors is because people are not into their looks, right? We are in touch with the immortality of the body. So since people are not going to be concerned with not soiling their garments, there is a fear that you're going to move the lamp from one room to the other. There might not be a kohen in the other room. So the Chachamim said, don't light it, the Beis HaAvel, even when a kohen is present, even in the big room. That is the first Tana. That is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosi, and guys, don't forget, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, who do we pass on like? Like Rabbi Yosi, Nemuka Imai. Rabbi Yosi holds the opposite. Madlik in the Beis HaAvel. Why is that? I know I'm saying the Gemara by heart because we had this in the Marafulda, but it's all based on the Gemara. He says that in a Beis HaAvel, people are brokenhearted. When people are humbled, they are more mindful to God. When there's less ego, there's more room for the Oibishter. Ego is edging God out. Now, Rashi Tevis. So, the Beis HaAvel, you have no concerns. I already mentioned that we're not that makvid when it comes to the mechitza in a Beis HaAvel, because you're in a Beis HaAvel. And if I cared, so there's no such a fear. But Beis HaMishta, people are celebrating, people are making a l'chaim, people might get frivolous, and they might forget to be meticulous in the observance of rabbinic law. And if I cared, they made a gezerah.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. Why don't we say the lamp is bittul to all the other lamps, like we said that before?
I'm sorry, that what?
Why isn't this the one lamp bittul to all the other lamps?
Very good. So Kevin is just reminding us that in the room itself, I'm sure there were many lamps, and therefore, since there are many lamps, since there are many lamps, let's say if the kohen walks out, we're not going to be concerned. If the kohen walks out, if we're going to follow that heter, the chashash Kevin is that when I walked from one room to the other, that's the way it worked. People allowed themselves to take a torch off the wall, say I want to go into that room, and I would have the torch in that room. There, I'm only having one torch. This is a fear. Maybe I'll do it. So it's amazing that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, they say the opposites. And then we have the other two Tanoim, Rav Meir and Rav Shimon. Rav Meir, Oyser kan v'kan, these are the words. Rav Shimon mater kan v'kan, and that's the siyum of the Masechta and the Mishnayos. And that will be the topic of the final small daf that we're going to learn right now. Actually, just to say right now in the words of introduction, that after we're going to go into who we paskin like, and it's going to be a little bit unusual because, like we mentioned, normally in Eruv and Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis in the Bavli, halacha should be like Rabbi Yosi. We're going to see over here that we paskin like Rab Shimon. We're going to see how we paskin over here, and the final discussion that we'll have in the Gemara will be whether a non-kohen can use shemen sreifa for the kindling of the menorah on Chanukah. That will be the final topic, and let's dive right inside. 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm sorry, 11 lines from the bottom of the Amid. 11 lines from the bottom of the Amid. And Daf Kuvav Amid Beis says, The Gemara, quoting the Holy Mishnah, Madlikim bebeis HaMishnah. These are just good to chazar the words. So you are allowed to light bebeis HaMishnah, avol bebeis HaAvol, like we just spoke out, divided Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosi says the opposite, bebeis HaAvol, you are allowed avol bebeis HaMishnah. Rav Meir oiser kan v'kan, but Rav Shimon mater kan v'kan. Okay, atkan. So now the Gemara expounds. My time the Rabbi Yehuda, it's amazing, Yehuda, the gears of Ami is without the hay. And then the Gemara with the hay. My time at Rabbi Yehuda, Beis HaMishnah, when it comes to going to a banquet, to a wedding, al yedei de moinei hoin. Right, money here means garments. The moinei and the kiyam, since the garments are clean, loy misasken be. People generally don't allow themselves. They don't want to grab any of these lamps, not to soil their clothing. So there's much less of a fear. But bebeis ha'avel, al yedei de moinei and tzoin. Actually, the words are that people go with soiled clothing. Then misasken bay, people do busy themselves with the lamp, and that's why, again, there's a more of a possibility that someone is going to move one of the lamps to a room where there's no kohen, and that lamp will be the one with shem and sreifa. Don't use it at all. Bebeis ha'avel. My time that Rabbi Yosi continues the Gemara. Well, that's good. How do you say the opposite? Beis ha'avel al yedei di inun chniin. There's hachna'ah. Right, the words in the Marafuld in the Mishnah was mitoich sheliba nishbar lo misasken bei. Why lo misasken bei? Because people, when they are humble, are very mindful about God's law, including rabbinic law. But beis hamishna al yedei di'inon pechizin. Interesting expression. Pechizin means they're merry. You know, it's beautiful. The Gemara is saying simcha doesn't lead a person to forget about God, but pechizin does. That's why the goyim say Merry Kratzma, Chosto. Because it's godless, because it's Avodah Zorah. So Misasken Bey, we're going to get banned on YouTube now. For this or for that. Misasken Bey, that's where we are afraid. My time that Rab Meir, let's go weiter. Rab Meir is the Machmer, right? Ein Chaveir of Yordan L'Soif Datoi. He says it's always going to be Yasser. Daf Kuf Zayin. Because it's easy. You know, what the Gemara is going to point out that Rav Meir and Rab Shimon don't have new logics. We got all of the svaras that the Torah is taking into account. Now the question is, which one are you going to follow? So Rav Meir is basically going to follow the logic l'chumra like Rabbi Yehuda, and the logic l'Rabbi Yosi also l'chumra. The Beis HaAvel, Rav Meir says he's right. Al yidei demoinei and soyin. The Beis HaAvel, in other words, Rab Meir follows the logic of Rabbi Yehuda in the case of the Beis HaAvel. Misasken Bey, there is a fear. The Beis HaMishnah, Al Yidei Di Inun Pechizin, this is the logic of Rabbi Yosi, who says that you can't lie to the Beis HaMishnah, Misasken Bey. And the same thing goes with Rab Shimon. Oh, the Gemara is telling you something. My Tama de Rab Shimon, there's no new svaras. He's using the logics of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, kan v'kan l'kula. The Beis HaAvel, Alidei di'inun kni'in lo misasken bei. The Beis HaMishnah alidei di'maneim nekiyim lo misasken bei. I would say when it comes to Rab Shimon, that since Rab Shimon Bar Yochai represents Pnimius HaTorah, the Pnimius of a Jew is pure and holy. So Pnimius of a Jew is by default. The default is, by default, are we sinners? Or default, are we observant? Depends. The Nefesh HaBahamis, the default is that we are selfish. The default of the Nefesh Alik is, if the default of the Rab Shimon, because he looks into the premise, is that we're going to do what God wants, he'll find svaras to back up that default.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why don't we consider the entire building as one location instead of room by room?
No, it doesn't work that way. Entire building is that if they're different rooms. I would say, Kev and Bachal, whoever went, in the olden days, the whole apartment, our apartments was one room. I don't know how it was in Iran. In Russia, the whole apartment was one room. My mother in one room. The room, that was the kitchen, that was the bedroom. The table became the bed. It was one room. The chiddush was that the Beis HaMishnah, they had an environment where there was more than one room. A different room, it's dark. Amrin devei Rabbi Yanai, says the Gemara, let's paskin. Halacha ke Rab Shimon. Another, Rabbi Yaakov Baracha b'shem Rabbi Yoshia, weiter, halacha ke Rab Shimon. Mater kan v'kan. Asks the Gemara, why do I even need? That's the question. Why do I need that heter? Rabbi Yosi tzaydana. Ba'o kum Rabbi Yirmiyah. The law came, if he wouldn't have had the Vei Rabbi Yanai, if he wouldn't have had the Rabbi Yaakov Baracha b'shem, if he wouldn't have had it, what do you think? Man nan amrin. What would anyone say we don't paskin like Rab Shimon? Can't be. Why not? Because we have the klal again. This is guys in Eruvin Bavli Eruvin Memvavam at base. Rav Meir ve Rab Shimon, isn't it ein halacha ke Rab Shimon? We already know that because since Chaverav were not yoyed l'soif daito the Rab Meir, we don't say since he's so wise we paskin like him. If we didn't understand Rav Meir, which we didn't understand the depth of his wisdom, we couldn't follow his halachic ruling. In other words, why do I need to have someone paskening? We already know from the general rule. And the answer is great. The answer is if there would only be a machlekes Rav Meir and Rab Shimon, then we would know already halachic Rab Shimon. Happens to be that that's the whole point of the Gemara. Rav Meir and Rab Shimon don't have a new argument. The real argument is Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. And Adarabba, for that we would say halachic Rabbi Yossi. Amalei, to which he responded, Shel kat koidmeni. There is a prior group, prior to Rav Meir and Rab Shimon. It doesn't mean that they came first. First of all, the Mishnah quotes them first. I understand this meaning that the underlying logics between why it should be mutter, why it should be utter, that was not brought up by Rav Meir and Rab Shimon. That was brought up by Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. For Rabbi Yehuda, oimer me'ein shneim. For Rabbi Yossi, oimer me'ein shneim. Me'ein means partially like each one. In other words, it's not so simple. You have a Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and they're speaking about the same ideas. And we have another klal that the Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is ke Rabbi Yossi. So actually, if you learn the Mishnah the way Rabbi formulated, he just informed you that there's a four-way machlekes tanoim. You know what you would have said? You would have said halacha ke Rabbi Yossi. You would have said madlikin bebeis avol, avoloi bebeis hamishta. So there's a big chiddush over here. That we don't do that. That we still paskin like we paskin like Rab Shimon. Now, why do we do that? The Gemara doesn't say, but there's a big novelty over here. Don't forget, al pi nigla, the whole prohibition of having hana'as kiloi is midrabanan. You can say by rabbinic law we can be more lenient. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, the final topic of this Masechta. Ma'u lahadlik I forgot, we're starting in a few minutes. Can you use it for Chanukah? Why would you be allowed to use it for Chanukah? We're talking about a Yisrael. That's the way that Asherilio. Listen, the final Asherilio. The end of the right column going into the left column. Madlikin shemen sreifa b'Chanukah shaloi b'reshus kohen. We're not talking about a kohen. We're talking about a Yisrael lighting it. And why would he be allowed? The mitzvah he. But now I'm asking a question. Why not? Why not Shabbos candles? But Shabbos candles is nishka mitzvah.
Or any other mitzvah.
Very good. So Rab Mendel is saying Gavaldik. Shabbos candles, the mitzvah is to benefit from the light. Very good. So there is Hana. Maybe that's Rabbi Mendel. Yeah. Since Chanukah, that if it ain't lanu reshus lishtamash behen, pure mitzvah. Maybe that's the word. It's not any mitzvah, even though he's bringing batei midrashas. But maybe this is better. Okay, so let's go on. So that was the question. The Gemara. Ma'ud lahadlik shemasei v'Chanukah. So Amrin devei Rabbi Yanai. Yes, you could. Madlikin shemen sreifa b'Chanukah. And what the Gabbai also is mentioning, that you see from all of this, we don't want for truma oil to lay around. We don't want it to lay around. We're finding any outlet. Amar Rabbi Nisa, look at these names. Amar Rabbi Nisa, Ano loichakim la'aba. I never met my father. How sad is that? But Ima, Havas Amrali, my mother would tell me that Avu Chava Amar, that your father would say, and we're going to read these words when we make the same here in the Gemara, but his father would say the same thing. But the way Rabbi Nisa's father said it was lechatchila b'diavad. That lechatchila for Chanukah, use if you're not a kohen, don't use shemen sreifa. But we can rely on the Vei Rabbi Yanai on a b'diavad and on that, Chevra, a big mazel tov to all the people that were Messiah Masechta Trumos. And with tremendous excitement, tomorrow morning at 6:15, we are starting Masechta Smaisis. I just want to say that this, I think is the biggest Masechta of the whole Talmud Yerushalmi. I might be wrong, but it's for sure the biggest Masechta of Zroyim. And as a rule, other Masechtas I think next Masechta has Mem Vav or Mem Zayim Dafim. And just saying, so we have the great merit of learning that which many